My name is Joe Martin. I am the evaluator, and this is Gretchen Eastman, who is a teacher here at Springville doing high school math. So the first thing I'm going to have Gretchen do is kind of explain what the lesson was about before we dive into it a little bit as far as the observations.
The class that Joe observed is a pre-algebra class, so the students are all freshmen who have shown that they struggle with mathematics. There are 6 students in the class, and the topic we were just starting to learn was the trigonometry ratios of sine, cosine, and tangent. And this lesson occurred the second day, where we had gone through a lot of the vocabulary the day before about opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse, and just we're starting to introduce sine, cosine, and tangent.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you. The very first thing that I noticed as I went through and was watching the lesson was that the students were productively engaged. So what is something that you, as you reflect on the lesson, that makes you stand out or makes you think that they were productively engaged?
Well, first of all, I set up a large triangle and had some signs that had the vocabulary words adjacent, opposite, hypotenuse, and then had some angles. And so just this group of kids, I know needs a lot of hands-on and kind of acting out the different concepts sometimes. And so by putting them on that large triangle and having them be the hypotenuse or be the opposite side, I think that really helped because they had to physically move to the spot on the triangle. And then when I gave them numbers, they had to decide, when we were talking about sine or cosine especially, which side did that number need to be? Was it the adjacent quantity? Was it the hypotenuse? Well, usually the hypotenuse stayed, and the opposite and the adjacent moved depending on the function. But I think just having to think those things through and then physically moved helped engage those kids more. And I tried to give everybody a role because they are a group that can easily get off topic, I guess, right, for lack of a better word, right, for describing them. So that was the other reason, I think.
What about the body language? Did you notice any body language from a certain student or a group of students that kind of made you maybe get them to understand or needed to reteach something?
Yeah, there were initially the idea of what side is opposite and what side is adjacent was confusing to the kids, and by having them stand physically where, because we had 2 reference angles, and so for the first angle they got it wrong, and so then I said, wait a minute, now think about opposite, and I had a kid stand at the angle and point at who was supposed to be opposite, and they could see, wait a second, that isn't, and so they quick switched. And so I think just that physical locating helped just kind of give them a mental picture, a mental hook for where they needed to be. I also had a kid that initially was kind of hanging off to the side and I think thought it was a little hokey, which it was, to have to stand and move. But by giving him a job, I made him the hypotenuse and he just had to stand there, so it got him involved. So just body language, I could tell initially he didn't want to get involved, and then of course I made him, so right, that helped. But yeah. You
talked about at the beginning that your goal was kind of to talk about sine, cosine, and tangent. As you went through though, did you have to alter those goals or your plan that as the lesson went on as you were teaching it?
I did. I actually, because we had gone through the words the day before, I thought the kids would understand what those terms were much more quickly, and they didn't. And so I actually took more time going back over opposite, adjacent. The hypotenuse, I think they understood, although now as we're going into some lessons, I can see they still are maybe needing a review of that. But I took more time with the vocabulary before then I brought it, because I had it, the idea that we'd quickly review the vocabulary and then talk about the ratios with numbers and have them, because in the end I had them with one person as the recorder write up the different ratios for the various angles with the numbers. I felt like we needed more time with the vocab first though, so I adjusted the lesson a little bit based on that.
And I thought it was, noticing, going through some of the teaching standards, especially with the classroom management as far as getting them engaged into the lesson, that was really well done through that. The other question dealing with your goals is, how do they match our district? Why do that lesson, I guess, in the way that you did it?
Well, one reason, as we are moving toward standards-based everything, we've been taking some time in district to look at the Iowa core, and I've gone to some trainings and you know, really dug into the Iowa core, and for this group of kids, because they're in pre-algebra right now, they may not get to Algebra 2. I'm hoping that they will choose to do that, but usually Algebra 2 is where they get some of that trig. Well, it's in the Iowa core that all kids need to meet these standards, and I wanted to make sure they had some exposure to those trig ratios in the event that they don't get to it. Now, they'll get to it probably in geometry, but I thought, you know, early on, if I can lay a foundation for them, that's going to help as well. And because I found sometimes the more kids are exposed to something, the more it starts to stick. So really, just because of the core and our standards, I want to make sure at least give them an initial exposure. And it's a smaller group. I think when they get into geometry and get into Algebra 1 then geometry, it's going to be a larger class, and they may not get that more hands-on or slowed down opportunity that I have with them right now in pre-algebra as well. So.
Excellent. Now, kind of switching gears a little bit, when we talk about the classroom management aspect and stuff like that, how do you feel the classroom management was, and then what could you or would you do differently if you could?
At the start of the class period, I didn't think it was very good because I needed to move some tables and things around and create some space, and so the kids had downtime. I think if I were to do this lesson again, I would have something for them to do while I was setting up, and I hadn't thought that part through, I guess, and because I have tables and stuff, just it takes a little bit transitioning from one to the next. So it did take a little bit to kind of get them in the flow of the lesson. Once things got set up, I think it went a lot better. They really did get engaged and everybody was involved because everybody had a job. Then at the end, the thing that I didn't plan in like I should have was some kind of an exit ticket or something just to do a quick check. Did they understand the concepts? You know, could they, if I had given them a triangle, identify the sides, you know, opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse? Could they have written a ratio for tangent, sine, and cosine using that triangle? And so that's the other thing is I need to do a better job of getting that quick snapshot assessment at the end of a lesson.
And that kind of answered my next question. It was going to be, you know, what feedback would you provide to students for the assessments you use, which you kind of talked about, the exit ticket type things. But going off of that, I guess a little bit, do you think your students learned what you intended for them to learn and why? And obviously with the exit tickets, it would have helped you maybe be able to see, you know, on paper that they actually understood it. But how else do you think they learned the material or didn't learn the material, I guess?
Yeah, that's
side.
a very good question. And I think part of the reason why I didn't have that exit ticket is in my head I was thinking we're going to have a lot of conversation and I can assess them more informally through that conversation. And I did use a lot of questioning in the lesson. The thing that made it difficult though is did individual kids get it? You know, like you said, just on paper and pencil, to know that, and I'm gonna call him by a fake name, so Johnny, to know that Johnny understood the concepts just like all the other kids did, versus, he just was kind of chiming in, oh yeah, that's right, and just really making sure that all the kids got it, not just because that kid kind of hung back and sort of agreed with everybody. It looked like he knew it,
Right.
but did he really understand it?